Hi, everybody. Julianna Forlano here with your action rundown. Guess what happened? There's a lot. Well, you know this already. There's a lot of disempowering talk about how the Democrats don't have a plan, and maybe they don't, or at least not one that is cutting through the corporate media static or the online algorithm tyranny. But the progressive wing actually does have a plan. I'm not saying it's good or that it's going to work, but we got a sneak peek at the Progressive Strategy Summit, where a lot of folks were there to explain all of those strategies to us. And surprise, surprise, the summit included grassroots leaders, policy advocates, labor movement people, electeds, and even artists from people-led movements across the country. When is the last time you saw anyone to the right of progressive have an artist or labor person or someone like that, anyone other than the Chamber of Commerce at their strategy summits? The summit was several hours, actually, and they went over their successes and challenges from the past year, and they laid out their plan for the next year. And don't worry, we edited out all the wonk to bring you the general idea. That's coming up next in our action rundown. So we're going over the Progressive Strategy Summit in this action rundown. First up, Bernie Sanders, their senator from Vermont, who he basically said the strategy that the main Democratic leadership is using is all wrong.
I happen to believe that the current strategy of the Democratic leadership is wrong. I think that for the last 6 months, we have cajoled, we have begged, we have compromised, we have negotiated, we have sat in back rooms for endless conversations to get these two senators to pass, they help us pass the Voting Rights Act, which is so significant if we're going to maintain American democracy, and to pass Build Back Better to protect the working families of this country. And we have failed. We have failed from a policy point of view. We haven't succeeded. And we have failed from a political point of view in the sense that our people, our supporters, are becoming demoralized. And what polls show is that everything continues the way it is. The Republicans stand a good chance of regaining the House and, in fact, taking the Senate. So I think we've got to change course. And I think what we have got to do is what democracy is all about. We got to bring the issues that impact the working class of this country onto the floor of the United States Senate, and we've got to vote. And if every Republican wants to vote against doing all of the things that are overwhelmingly popular that the American people want, they're going to have to go home and explain it to their constituents. And if Senators Manchin and Sinema want to do the same, they're going to have to go home and explain it to their constituents. But what we have got to do now, and do it very quickly, is show the working families of this country that at least 48 of us in the US Senate are prepared to stand with them. We're prepared to take on the wealthy, the powerful, the oligarchs, and we're prepared to fight for a series, an agenda of proposals which meet the needs, the long neglected needs of working families.
Oh, man. Let's leave it to Bernie to say that we should use our progressive might to burn the whole thing down. I love the way he brought up the idea that we have to talk directly to the working families, because who among you are not a working family? Congresswoman Jayapal from Washington also talked about how the progressives stood together and used block voting. That's what they're doing for the Build Back Better. They're using the power of the progressive bloc to get things done. And that was the strategy that led to Build Back Better getting passed in the House. Let's take a listen.
Required building relationships, engaging and organizing members, and developing both strategy and tactics that could support a block play inside Congress with the movement outside alongside us. It meant instituting rules reforms and establishing a real value add for engaged CPC membership and developing a clear and disciplined message on a core set of priorities with full member buy-in. Ultimately, we needed people to believe in block voting, to feel and flex their power for the first time. And feel it we did. Courage begets courage, and strength always emerges in moments of crisis. I know you all know this feeling. It's an electric thing to be a part of. People coming together to fight for what they believe in and do something greater than anyone could do on their own. Progressives in the House held the line twice, plus a third very long day, holding to our maximum point of leverage to force the Build Back Better plan from an idea to an actual piece of legislation that included nearly all of our progressive priorities: universal pre-K and childcare, funding to address homelessness and repair our crumbling public housing, lowering the cost of prescription drugs and expanding healthcare access, immigration reform, home-based care for seniors and people with disabilities, and funding to raise the wages of care workers. Had we not done this, Build Back Better would have never passed through the House. Now, I recognize that it's not yet passed in the Senate, and our work remains to do so. But let us mark what has truly been an unprecedented display of organizing, courage, and collective power from our Congressional Progressive Caucus in the House.
I mean, it certainly goes against the narrative that Democrats don't have a spine or a plan or a message. Well, at least the progressive Democrats have a spine, which they are showing, and a plan, which they are telling us about, and a message. Congressman Mark Pocan from Wisconsin spoke on getting even more resolute and more firm, given what he calls the historic legislative obstruction by our own freaking party members. Those were my words, not his. And Pocan makes a bold case for just bringing on the executive orders. Here he is.
The things that can still happen with this, we have to say it, really historic amount of obstruction that we're facing in Congress. It may be a 50-50 Senate. It may be a less than a handful margin in the House, but the obstruction I have never seen in my now 10th year in Congress. One of the areas that we really want to see are aggressive use of executive action by the president. Now, granted, it's not going to be as long-term as actual law changes, because a future president can change things. But a lot of these are going to be hard to change once they're put in place. And we need to work directly with the Biden administration on being as creative as possible. So while we want to get Build Back Better done by the time that we're going to have the State of the Union, we also should be looking at every aspect of it, what can be done via executive order, because we've all spent months and months and months talking about these direct benefits to people. We have to be able to make sure we can show how another path can happen if for some reason some components don't make it through and Build Back Better. But there's so much more we can do too. We can go into actually things that can reduce the cost of prescription drugs. We can address climate change very directly in a number of substantive ways. We can add to worker power. Even though we can't through reconciliation pass the PRO Act, the most important labor legislation we've seen since I've been to Congress, we can do a lot of other provisions that'll give workers an even playing field in a lot of ways very creatively. We can also address the care economy and immigration, social justice, and so much more. So we are very focused as a progressive caucus in not only passing the bills that Pramila talked about, but also working with the administration to do what they can within their power. If you're going to have obstructionists in the House and Senate, then we have to be able to give the tools directly to the Biden administration so we can get these things done. And I think it's quite possible.
Well, I think he's right. I mean, Biden did have to wait a few months to show the damage that the obstruction is doing before he could really feasibly come out of the box swinging his bick like the pen, and making executive orders. The right is going to go nuts about King Biden or, autocracy. So he really has to set up the narrative that he had no choice, that he was being obstructed from doing things that are emergent, like addressing climate change. I hope that's what Biden is doing, or at least that's what we can push him to do, because we've got climate disasters piling up right outside, and we need action. Here is Nick Tilson. He's the president of NDN Collective. He's talking about how climate change and indigenous movements interact.
The reason why climate change is on absolute escalated levels right now is because we're living in an extractive based economy, and that has been the policy that has supported that extractive based economy. And in the process of building that extractive based economy, they have absolutely stolen and robbed indigenous people's lands and our human rights in the process. Indigenous people have been preserving and protecting biodiversity here in the United States and globally. So you're seeing things come out of the administration, like prioritizing co-management of public lands and return of public lands back to tribes for the purpose of helping fight climate change in the world.
Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan's 13th also went to discuss the essential need for federal action from the president because of the climate crisis. Here she is.
Friends at the Center for Biological Diversity have a great list for all those listening, a great list of executive actions the president could take today to actually deliver on the promise to be a climate president. The White House and the president need to step up. They need to be bold and courageous. They have failed our communities by passing the bipartisan, infrastructure bill that gutted NEPA and subsidizing fossil fuel industry without the climate investments and mitigations that are in Build Back Better. They both belong together and they should have stayed together. People across the country, no matter where folks live, they want a courageous approach to addressing the impact of climate in their lives. And they know that the federal government has to take a lead on this. And again, time is of the essence. And I know the president can gain so much incredible support, not only from grassroots organizations I've worked with, but other organizations that may be labor community, maybe the sector that's working on green infrastructure. All of them will come to the table and support this effort.
This is how the sausage is made, people. It's talking, it's points, it's calm discussion. And that is why cable news and online algorithms have to have giant fights in order to get out eyeballs and make things way more combative than they absolutely need to be. Although we are in a climate emergency, that's something we could all be upset about. Congresswoman Jayapal, who we saw earlier, comes on next to finish up this segment on what's next for progressive strategy. Shh, don't tell the Republicans.
We are developing our strategy right now, and I think it is a multi-tiered strategy. We need to pass Build Back Better, and we are working right now to figure out how that happens. And I just want to remind everybody that the Congressional Progressive Caucus did endorse the framework that was released on October 28th, that was agreed to by Senator Manchin and given a commitment to by Senator Manchin to the president. And so what we are pushing for is as quickly as possible to pass that. Now, it is less than what the House passed in Build Back Better. We understand that, but it has many of the major components of the things that are transformational, including childcare and pre-K and housing investment and climate investment and elder care investment. These are all major pieces. And there was at least a transition extension of the child tax credit for a year in that framework. So I think that is really, we're trying to stick as close to that as possible, plus whatever immigration provisions we can get. Those were our 5 priorities. And so we're trying to do that. And our goal is to try to pivot back to those discussions, get the agreement, and do as much passage as we can before March 1st when the president comes to give his State of the Union. Mark's going to talk about the executive actions piece, which is a really important part of how we lower costs for families and how we strengthen and show leadership on climate. And so that's a second sort of strategy that we're moving at the same time. And then the third piece of our strategy is a legislative strategy for the rest of the year. Now, some of that involves getting the Senate to put up bills that we have already passed in the House, and we need to at least make sure that people understand and are forced to vote yes or vote no on those. Now, we understand the problems with the filibuster, but that is still really important on something like the Dream and Promise Act, just as an example. Why can't we put that up for a vote in the Senate and force Republicans who say that they support Dreamers to decide whether or not they're actually going to support Dreamers? The same thing with the PRO Act, the same thing with the the Raise the Wage Act. I think we need to make these commitments. But on top of that, the House can pass a few more things that will also make it clear what Democrats stand for. I think of things like dental, vision, and hearing for Medicare expansion. Ana Lilia, this is something you and I worked so closely on last year. Lowering the Medicare eligibility age, passing John Larson's Social Security Act. This is a really important bill that makes necessary changes for seniors. And I think we should get people on the record about whether they support workers, whether they support seniors, whether they support immigrants. So that is the third part of our strategy, is the legislative piece. And I think we're making some progress on all of those things, including our student debt executive action that we're hoping student debt cancellation that we're hoping the president will take.
Gee, wouldn't it be nice if the progressives had a bigger block to leverage in the House instead of letting those seats go to Republicans or corporate Democrats? They've been leveraging their block in the House and even in the Senate. It would be nice to have a progressive block. Well, if we want that, it requires that we support and vote for candidates for the House that are within the Democratic Party. I hear a lot of talk about how folk don't believe in a two-party system. Well, who does? They've been let down by the Dems and betrayed by the Squad and all manner. I've heard all manner of talk of wrong-headed algorithm-pleasing talking points on the internet that suggest you should never, ever vote for a Dem. But some of the progressive Dems are trying here. Those lefties, quote unquote, saying never Dem are actually really appealing to your black and white thinking. And they are also helping usher in fascism. We don't need that. We can be grown-ups. We can see that many in the Democratic Party and the party machine itself are bought by corporate interests. And we can still vote for progressives just in case our fatalism is wrong. And we are willing to push toward the miracle. Good things can happen, but not if we just have that fatalism that online talking heads, some, and even, the TV heads on the TV heads are trying to sell us. And in a shameless plug of something I'm doing, but to raise money for progressive candidates who are not taking corporate contributions all over the country. On February 16th, put up the plaque, Giancarlo. I am appearing alongside Marianne Williamson, Brianna Joy Gray, Katie Halper, and Crystal Ball to both showcase some of these candidates and raise some cash and some awareness of these amazing folks. Plus, there's going to be a lot of talk between me and these other four fabulous women about the state of progressivism in our country today. Seriously, there are a lot, I've been looking at them, of unbought and unbossed women running for the House this fall. And there are some really good guys, too. We're going to show you them as well. So mark your calendars for 6 to 9 p.m. on next Wednesday, February 16th, right here on act.tv. I'm Julianna Forlano. That's it for the show today. Join us on Thursday, where I have a very special guest. We're going to be talking about the intersection between left policy and left politics and spirituality. That should be a fun one. Thanks for watching. See you then.